So it's the 25th anniversary of the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters. Time flies, I guess, when you're having fun. I've not been directly, unfortunately, involved in shortwave for about the last 10 years when I left NASB Broadcasting at that time. But my heart always remains in shortwave no matter what I'm doing. I've been a television broadcast engineer since I was 18. But I usually tell people that if you cut me, I bleed HF. So it was one of my dreams as a young boy. I first heard HCJB when I was 9 years old in 1960 on a radio that my dad had fixed for a neighbor. And the repair bill was $7, and the neighbor never had the $7. And so finally, after a few months, the neighbor said, I'm never going to have the $7. And so I was able to turn it on, and that's when I heard HCJB, and I was hooked on shortwave ever since. In 1964, I started listening a lot. I mean, I listened before then, but I gathered a QSL collection, and not a large one like, say, Adrian Peterson has, but 30 or 40 ones that I really valued. And I always wanted to be the chief engineer of a shortwave station. And 20 years later, I worked for a fellow named Dr. Lester Summerall, and discovered quite by accident, because I was showing his son my shortwave QSL collection from 20 years earlier, and he says, hey, my dad has always wanted a shortwave station. I said, well, I've always wanted to build one. And about a year and a half later, we went on the air. Now, that was not necessarily so easy to do, because there was a freeze on shortwave broadcasting for at least 20 years. And if memory serves me right, probably in 1964, I think there were only 4 shortwave stations on the air. What I'm recalling is Family Radio, WINB, KTWR, and then KGEI, the Voice of Friendship, out of San Francisco, and I have one of their QSL cards. And then, due to the efforts of Joe Costello in New Orleans, and George Jacobs, and a New Orleans attorney, Ashton Hardy, citing Public Law 80-402, we were able eventually to persuade the FCC to start granting licenses again. And I think that WRNO was probably the very first one. LaCie, WHRI, came in pretty quickly after that, maybe the second or the third. I don't know who else was really, really early. But one of the things about the 80s was that, a lot of us were very small broadcasters, 100 kilowatt transmitter, log periodic antenna, not a huge facility. And also the FCC, bless their heart, was not being funded to attend the HFCC conferences. And that was a big concern at the time for us. Fortunately, we did come up with a thing called out-of-band frequencies, and that helped the smaller broadcasters especially. So as the 80s progressed and we wanted to try to get a greater voice for the new group of FCC licensed shortwave broadcasters, and by that time, by about 1989, I think there were about 16 licensed stations by then. NAB was having a radio convention in New Orleans in 1989, and it just so happened that the Society of Broadcast Engineers that I was a part of and still am today was having a joint meeting with them at Radio 89. And I did a seminar on something that the SBE nor NAB had been particularly interested in before. And so the seminar was entitled The Technical Aspects of Shortwave Broadcasting. And a number of people attended, and they were going, a lot of the people from the shortwave world were really going for the NAB radio show as much as anything. And so at that September 12th, 1989, at the New Orleans meeting, about 8 of us got together. We took a tour of WRNO and Joe Costello's facility, and those are the 8 people, essentially, that came together. And if there are any others, I don't remember them, and I'm sorry, but these are all I've been able to remember since 1998. But you have Ed Bailey from KNLS, of course, and Ralph Carlson, who at the time had a for-profit real capitalist venture there. Joe Costello, WRNO, Ed Evans with Christian Science, myself, George Jacobs, who was also pushing very hard for the creation of NASB, Ted Haney with Far East Broadcasting, and Tulio Haylock with Adventist World Radio. And so we got together, we decided to do it, and by February 1st of 1990, the papers were signed to incorporate NASB, and our representation at that time was an attorney by the name of Dick Zaragoza with Fisher Wayland, and he represented us for a number of years. And so in February, I think we had our first telephone call on February the 12th, and that was our first official meeting of the NASB. In those days, there was no email. And so everything was done by conference call. The meetings were by conference call, and the communication was by fax. So unfortunately, up until about 1998, I don't necessarily have a way of reconstructing some of the things that occurred with the detail that I hope that I did later. These three gentlemen were they really did the yeoman's work in the first few years of NASB. You had Ed Bailey as president, Ted Haney as vice president, Tulio Haylock as the secretary treasurer. We were in the red in those days, red ink, a lot of red ink. I mean, not horrible, but I mean, fortunately, Dick Zaragoza was a pretty understanding person at the time, and stuck with us. And we had the same president, vice president, and secretary treasurer up until May of 1997. These three, they did the early work of NASB. I'm trying to be polite here. I could say that we were sort of a joke, but we certainly necessarily did not have a whole lot of respect in the beginning. I mean, just a handful of shortwave broadcasters, some with 100 kilowatt transmitters. I mean, we didn't have a lot of credibility in the beginning. We weren't taken very seriously. And so we had to work on that very hard. And these three gentlemen really laid the groundwork for that in the years that they were the officers. So we've had a number of presidents since 1997. We changed our bylaws somewhere around 98, 99, around in there somewhere, to put term limits on members of the board of directors. You serve 2 3-year terms. And that's both a good thing and it's a bad thing. The good thing is you constantly are changing your officers and you're changing your presidents, and that's a good thing. But the bad thing sometimes is you get a guy you'd rather not change, but he term limits out. But I think all in all, it was still a good move. You get more involvement among the membership. A lot of people get a shot. A lot of stations get a shot at being on the board and to be officers and to be a president or whatever. So here are our presidents since 1997, the best that I can remember and reconstruct. Ted Haney served 4 years, and then Ed Evans with Christian Science. And then Jeff White, unfortunately, was term limited out. And so then I became president in 2004 for a couple of years, and then we brought Jeff White back, which is a really good move. Then, as my recollection, you help me out here, Jeff, in 2012, right around the first of the year, you resigned, I think, to take secretary position when Dan Ellier, and then Glenn Tapley became president, and then now the president is Brady. First secretary-treasurer was Tulio Haylock, and he did that for 7 years, and then Dan Ellier did it for a long time and worked closely with Jeff down there in the Miami area. And then Jeff White became secretary officially in 2012. And then also there was a time when the bylaws do not require that the secretary be a member of the board of directors, although he always had been up until around in here. And at one point, then Jeff became an assistant secretary treasurer, and that's a position we hadn't had before. And then he became president in 2006, and then his wife Tice has been assistant secretary treasurer ever since then. And of course, we all know how much hard work these two people do. Now, I've tried to remember everyone who's served on the board, and I may not have gotten this right, but I think I've got it right since about 1997. And John, you were before that, right? And Glenn Sink. So you and Glenn Sink are the only two I can remember before then. If you remember anybody else, let me know. But all of these people, they're all worth a mention, because you wouldn't have a society if all these people hadn't volunteered their time. And I'm sure that you know what stations they're associated with. But I'm going to take a look at the names, because they're the ones that gave you the society that you have, and gave of their time, and made the organization what it's become. And remember, we started out with very little respect. You remember that, don't you, John? And of the 8 founders that I can recall,
we're all learning how to work with each other, which hadn't been done up to that point.
Right, and we're a small group, but we all have a lot of common interests, whether it's internet over power line, or fee structures, or whatever. At least for the first time we could come together. You're smiling, Tom. Yeah. But at least for the first time, yeah. And then, at some point, and I don't know when, but I think maybe in the early 90s, the FCC started getting funding again to go to the HFCC conferences. And I don't know that NASB necessarily had anything to do with that, but it probably didn't hurt. Another big thing happened in 1998 is we launched a website, reasonably early on in the scheme of websites, to have a website up at all. And so it was hosted by the company that I worked for at the time, LaC Broadcasting. And then all of a sudden, now we have email. We have a board reflector. You can just do the board email, and all the members of the board of directors gets it. And so we have easy communication now. Beats faxes, beats the conference calls. And of course, we always had our annual meetings. And this is not necessarily the web page that started in 1998, but it's similar to the one that's there now. So again, people we need to be very grateful to are the associate members over the years. Again, I've endeavored to remember all of them. I don't know that I have. If you see anybody that's missing, let me know. Jeff said something about him wanting me to post this to the history page, which I may do. So I would like to make sure it's right. And of course, some of the companies have gone through different names. But without the support of these associate members, we wouldn't have, again, been able to do the things that we've done and succeeded at what we're doing. So it's a good thing just to take a look at all these names. HCJB was always an associate member, because since it was not an FCC licensed station, it couldn't actually be a member of NASB, but it was always an associate member. And so, anybody see anybody that's missing? Oh, you wouldn't see them if they're missing, but can anybody think of anybody that's missing there?
Pretty good list.
It is over the years. Some of them were only associate members for a couple of years, and they came and went, but a lot of them have stayed. Like Babcock, which was Merlin, VT Merlin. Yeah, and Broadcast Belgium had a different name too, didn't they? Yeah, TDP. Yeah. So all of these organizations are important. Now, I tried to find an IBB logo. Is there such a thing as an IBB logo? Because I couldn't find it on a web page anywhere. Okay, well, if you're not sure, then I feel better. So I of course, I put RFA and VOA up there to represent IBB, who've been an important associate member for us for a long, long time. And then, every shortwave station that's been licensed has not been a member. the NASB, but a lot of them have at some point. There's just very few stations that have never been members. So if I have any outdated logos here, I'm sorry, but that's what I was able to grab as I put things together. But these are the logos, at least to the best that I can. Although I couldn't find one for Herald either. I never could find a logo for Christian Science.
I don't remember one either.
Yeah. So I typed that. But again, the NASB is because of all of the people that you see here. Like WMLK, we were supported very much by by Elder Jacob O'Meyer. He was always great to talk to. He was always supportive of the organization. He was on the board. So again, you see anybody that's missing, let me know. So the NASB began to grow in influence and maybe to pick up a little bit of respect. On August 27th, 2001, the very first HFCC conference that was ever held in North America was held in Montreal. And so some of us attended. It was also the 10th anniversary of the HFCC coming together because you had, I don't remember their names, but you had the West Bloc group and then you had the Eastern European Bloc group headed by Eldridge Cheap. And so I know that George Jacobs addressed that HFCC in Montreal. You were there, Jeff. Okay. So during his opening remarks, Eldridge specifically acknowledged that Jeff and I were present representing the NASB. That was really nice to have that kind of acknowledgement since we were still weren't sure what kind of respect we were building in the international community. Tom Polson, and I choose to believe that this is a positive comment, but Tom Polson at that meeting said, "I've never had so much help before." So I think that was meant to be positive. Although I guess it could be the other way. But I'm accepting it as positive. And then Eldridge made a special point looking Jeff and I up individually before we left. And just said he looked forward to future involvement by the NASB. That was a pretty doggone good thing to hear from the chairman of the HFCC. Now at Montreal, Jeff White was there, I was there, George Ross, Glenn Tapley, George Jacobs, Stanley Linewall was there representing Family Radio. It's my recollection that there were some others from WEWN there also, but I had no record. I just knew there were some others. Yeah. All right, yeah. So, sorry, I would have put your name, but I mean, part of the truth here is when I told Jeff that the 25th anniversary was coming up, I don't know if he'd remembered it or not, but I just said I would like to come, partly because I love shortwave and I bleed HF, and I never said I was going to speak. And last Thursday I saw the agenda and I'm on it.
That's how it goes.
So you got to watch what you say to Jeff White. So now we've attended an HFCC conference and we've been recognized politely, at least, and that's good. And then Jeff managed to attend the very next one in Bonn. And I think you're the only one from NASB that attended. I think so, but we felt like it was incumbent upon us to get there since at least we'd been recognized. But so I think the next big one for HFC, for NASB, was Bangkok. This is the first time that the HFCC had all three organizations coordinating in a single database. You had the ABU, you had the Arab States Broadcast Union, and had the HFCC all there in Bangkok. And there on behalf of the NASB FCC delegation, to the best that I can remember, Tom Lucy, myself, Dennis Dempsey, and George Ross. All right, then the next really big thing that happened for us was the HFCC ASBU conference in 2005. I was president. There's Jeff.
Oh, there's photo documentation this time, Jeff.
Yes. I was president, and Jeff White and Tice and Joanna, Tice's sister, did all the work. I mean, that is just the best thing you can have, isn't it, Brady? Is to just have Jeff White doing all the work for you. And we had it in Mexico City, Ciudad Mexico. I mean, partly for political reasons, hosting what we expected to be some of the attendees and getting them visas into the United States was potentially problematic. And so that's why the NASB hosted its first HFCC, the second one in North America, the first one hosted by the NASB, but we hosted it in Mexico for visa reasons. I've pretty much got that right? Jeff and NASB has not been idle since then. If you look at the HFCC conferences since 2005, every place there's red was either one hosted by the NASB or one co-hosted by the NASB. You got NASB in Punta Cana, and then NASB with Thomson Broadcast in Switzerland, and then another really big one, the first HFCC ever in the United States of America was in Dallas and hosted by Continental and NASB. And then later in B12, TDF and NASB, and you can just read down the list there up, and I assume the same Brisbane is still on the list for August 15th. Yeah, and I might say, just on a side note, this picture actually has come out of a chapter that I'm doing for the Society of Broadcast Engineers. We're putting together an engineering SBE engineering handbook, and so I wrote an article on shortwave, I don't know, maybe 6,000 words, just talking about shortwave in general and mentioning HFCC a little bit and NASB just a little bit, but this is actually going to appear probably at the end of the year. You know, that's a plug for a book I'm helping to edit, but I don't imagine that any of you are likely to buy it. But I think this is important. I mean, we hit the big time, and got to be respected through all of your hard work, through all of our hard work, and through the assistance of the associate members that we talked about, and all the members who've supported us over the years. And so we had a newsletter all along, and we had a nice, a fairly decent, an okay web page. I can say that because I'm the one that does it. But in 2011. Then we launched Facebook, and that's better than a newsletter, and it's immediate, and Jeff can post to it all the time or whoever. And so on June 24th, 2011, NASB launched their Facebook page. And I think that's like the very first comment and the very first response that you had. And so I started this by saying that the NASB was not taken too seriously in the very beginning, and they weren't. But in February of this year, in Oman, the NASB was taken about as seriously as you can possibly be taken, with Jeff White of NASB being elected the new chairman of the HFCC. And that's pretty much it.